Just while we're waiting for Josh to look into his mic here, you mentioned earlier the custom hero plus Sonic stages from Forces being like a counterpoint to how this game was designed. When I first played Forces, honestly, that controlling them both at the same time honestly really threw me off.
Really?
It felt weird. It wasn't until I played it for a little longer that I realized, oh, I'm controlling them both at once. Because like I remember looking in the controls, like the configuration menu on the PC, and it's saying like press L or the left trigger to switch. And I didn't know that meant press the left trigger to switch your Wispons. I thought it just meant to switch between the custom character and Sonic. I didn't realize I was going to be playing as both of them at the same time, so it was weird.
Well, I mean, to me, I think it's... Here's the thing, I realized at some point playing Sonic Heroes that I wasn't actually playing as 3 characters. I was playing as one character with 3 different modes. And so you have all this huge array of moves, but having to switch between them is just a lot of busy work. And with Forces, they kind of ditched that pretense. It's like, no, well, we're admitting that you're just playing as one character with twice as many tricks. And it's like a context-sensitive thing. I just think it cut out a lot of the busy work that kind of hampered Heroes and slowed it down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's just once you get into that mindset, once you realize that you're really playing as one character that's glorified as 3, because I know there's 3 character models on screen, but you're only ever playing as one of them at a time. It's not like in an RPG where they're like all potentially doing something, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I don't know. Yeah, I know, but it's become clear to me that, evidently, I have the most positive opinion of Heroes of the 3 of us.
I actually do like it a lot. I'm just acknowledging that there are, certain things about the design that are awkward. But I can still have fun with it. I can still enjoy it.
Because it's like, all the things you guys have said are true. So it sounds like Josh is back.
Yeah, well, see, here's the thing. I can enjoy this game, but I don't think it's as good as I once thought it was back in the day, because back in the day I actually really loved this game and I thought it was, just one of the best Sonic games. But now looking back at it and playing it again, I can have fun with it, but it's only because I sometimes feel like the only reason I still enjoy some of these games is because I played them and because I'm invested in Sonic. Whereas if I played some of them now, I wouldn't enjoy it as much if I, wasn't into Sonic, I mean.
Well, yeah, but, that's kind of always just a big what if.
Yeah,
if
true.
that makes any sense. Like,
True.
What if I had not played this or that game at this specific time?
But going back to it, I was pretty annoyed by dying to things that weren't my fault, because I also, for the review, just like you did, I 100%ed that game. And that really kind of highlights how, I don't want to say broken, but how unstable this game is. And not in terms of performance, but just the mechanics.
Yeah.
Which stage are we in now?
We're in City Metropolis, or whatever it's called.
Metropolis. Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, I am not able to see what Mike is doing because of a poor Discord connection. And now, Josh's mic isn't even working. Oh boy, this is falling apart real fast.
Okay, then, yeah, I can't see the Discord because I'm playing. So maybe we should pause for a moment.
I think he's, I see some kind of golden turtle, and now he's tornadoing it, and I think there's some kind of pole coming up.
They really want you to use a tornado a lot in this game. And to their credit, it is a neat idea for a Sonic move, where instead of, doing a homing attack, you essentially just zip around an enemy super fast and make this tornado that throws them off their feet. That's a cool enough idea, but it takes so long, just watching it happen, and you can't even, hit an enemy when they're stumbling around. You have to wait for the tornado to disappear, and they make you use it on poles so many times, where you have to watch them slowly swirl around it until they get going, and then they start chaining the poles together in a sequence. Anyway, geez, I'm sure I'm complaining a lot about a game that I supposedly like.
Yeah.
Well,
so
that's
Josh's
the thing. You can.
Is Josh's mic broken or whatever? What's going on?
He's gonna try restarting
Discord. I'll be right back. But yeah, I think I can like games that I don't think are actually that good. I do think I can make that separation.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's also with Sonic 06. I know all the things about that game because I played it so often as a kid, so I know how to avoid all that crap in the game and just play the good parts and ignore the shitty parts, but that still doesn't mean I think it's terrible. I mean, don't think it's terrible. It still doesn't mean I don't think it's terrible. I don't think it's good. That's it.
The thing about Heroes is, yeah, it is like, I mean, all Sonic games really are a little bit glitchy here and there. So yeah, this game might have a few pitfalls, but mechanically, to me, it is no less sound than your average 3D Sonic game. And I think that most of those are at least tolerable.
I actually disagree. I think after Sonic 06, this might be one of the most fidgety and just generally not pleasant feeling Sonic games to play. Because, you know, Colors and Generations and Forces, even though they have their own problems, at least they feel fine, except Forces and Classic Sonic, but here just the controls just do not feel right to me, and the whole way the game plays. I don't know if I'm alone on that, but
the only thing that's really awkward about the controls to me is, actually there are two things, but they're the kind of things where I have to be an idiot really in order for them to happen, like it's my fault, not the game's fault. Is when Sonic ends up going too fast that I have to pull back on the control stick a little bit to get him to stop and not careen off the edge of a platform. Or when I'm playing as a power character like Knuckles or Omega, and when you like punch with them, you veer forward, you know, so it's really easy to fall off a platform then too. But I always looked at that as like, oh, well, that's not a problem with the game, it's a problem with me. You know, I did that, that's my fault.
There is some of that, admittedly. And we might need to stop here for just a moment so that we can get Josh back in the call. Like there is some element of that, but there are things that legitimately don't feel right. Like everybody mentions Knuckles sliding around when he's punching people. There's the fact that if you are holding down the B button while you try to switch rails, you will fly off at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Like, there are plenty of things in here that are clearly the game's fault.
And scripted sequences that make you die.
Yeah, like when I glitched through the floor earlier.
Yeah, or or when you fly off the ramp and then the thing hits you and you fall down, or sometimes you'll fly into a ring as the flight character, and because you weren't exactly at the right angle, you'll fly like above it or under it and you'll fall down and you can't do anything.
Yeah, so there are legitimate control issues in this video game.
I must just have insane luck when it comes to these sorts of things. I mean, anecdotally, I just never like had as many struggles as like, people tend to say, and I have to like see it happening to them to really believe it. And I see some of that happening here. But like even Rail Canyon, I remember I used to be such a snob that on my old channel, I uploaded this video just of me going through Rail Canyon, saying, "Rail Canyon isn't hard, guys." Like, that was the title of the video, as if I was just trying to prove a point. And I showed myself flawlessly going through, like, the entire opening section as, like, the Team Dark version, which is even longer, as if to say, like, look, you guys are just doing it wrong.
I think it's a very real thing where you kind of develop muscle memory for certain games and intuition for how it plays. Because if you haven't played Sonic Heroes, it's gonna be hell, most likely. And if you haven't played the classic Sonic games, you don't know that on a hill you're supposed to hold down. You know, it's all these kinds of little things that you may take for granted when you're so experienced with the game. But somebody who is not experienced with it, the design is not very intuitive or well polished in many ways.
That's why some people think that Sonic in general is trash, because They think that you shouldn't have to use muscle memory to beat a game. That you should be able to just pick up and play it and beat it just like that. And that's why I like a lot
I
of...
don't think... I don't know if that's really...
So, why don't we just stop for a moment here and so that Josh can get back on the call. And then we'll continue this discussion in just a moment.
Right.
Right.
Cool.
All right. I pressed continue late, Editor Michael. All right,
so
we're
we
all
were
back.
talking about... oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we're all back now. Josh, evidently, I told Josh to everybody to turn down their microphone levels to a specific thing for audio compression purposes. And I guess that threw a monkey wrench in Discord's audio sensitivity, and that's why it was cutting out. So that's all resolved now. So we're back. We can...
Yeah. And what we were talking about, Josh, was... I feel like you kind of develop muscle memory and intuition for certain games and their flaws when you get more experience with them, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you kind of accustomed to the weird quirks of a game and its mechanics and its controls.
Yeah.
And then when people don't have that experience, like, for us, it's like, wow, this game is so easy. Wow, you suck. Look at how bad you're playing. But that's just simply because we have all the experience and we know the ins and outs of how it plays and how to avoid all the bullshit.
Yeah, it can be really, really hard to, with a game, especially with a game that you've been playing like most of your life or something, to even remember, to even see like some of the things that other people might struggle with as problems. I remember particularly noticing that with myself when Sonic Mania came out, and you know, you had people like making having problems with it that I remember vaguely having like 25 years ago. But it's really hard to sort of it can be really hard to remember that sort of mindset. And as far as like being able to like play around the flaws of a game, I think you especially see that with a lot of early 3D titles, where where the you know
oh yeah, go ahead.
Where like the, you know, the standards of the time were like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing, this is so revolutionary, and now it looks very antiquated and feels very outdated to play, but nobody like cared at the time.
Yeah, so I recently, because of the Resident Evil 2 remake, which was fucking amazing, I went back to the old Resident Evil games, and those tank controls, I was like, how do people play this? I don't get it. I was so thrown off by it, and people were saying, oh, I never had problems with it. But to me, it was so weird initially. I just didn't understand. Now I'm used to it, but that just goes to show... I think that's another good example of it, tank controls. For some people, they feel completely fine, and for others, it's heresy.
Well, the thing is, you know, at the time, there were no standards as to how a 3D game was even supposed to control. So, yeah, you did have games that used tank controls. You had more, like, free-flowing things that would, like, react depending on the position of the camera, like Mario 64 was. And what's kind of interesting is that, like, I remember when, like, Mario 64 was the only 3D game I had ever played after several years of, you know, playing, like, 8 and 16-bit titles. And, like, as much trouble as people have now when they pick up a Resident Evil, and experience those tank controls, like, I had just as much problems, like, back then learning to control Mario 64, because, you know, I'd never used an analog stick before.
Oh, yeah, I love how in that game they had to include a cameraman, you know, the Lakitu brother, just to explain the concept of a camera, because it was such a new thing for people at the time that they couldn't just have it behind the player. They had to explain, like, oh no, there's somebody there following Mario around. That's why you see him from behind instead of from the side. But I remember when I first started playing Sonic games, like the classic Sonic games, I didn't know you were supposed to roll down slopes and manipulate, you know, the environment that way. So I had the hardest time making it past the first few levels of any given Sonic game. And then I got the Mega Collection, and one day, as I was playing one of them, it just clicked. I suddenly realized, oh, hey, I can use the physics, I can use momentum to get where I want. And suddenly, the games were super easy, and I blew through them all in just a couple of days. But you see, before I realized that, when I was playing it as a more conventional game, I had the hardest time with it. And I understand that that's how most Sonic games play, really. That's how most Sega games play, because they have a much more arcadey mindset, where the goal isn't just to simply make it to the end, but to look good, to look stylish while you do it. And that's not for everybody. Some people do want it to be a more like instant gratification. They can just pick up and play and not have to learn to play the game's way. And they see that kind of philosophy as,
I just want to play the game.
Yeah, and they see that more arcadey mindset of having to try it over and over again and get better each time as outdated, invalid, because they only have so much time to play video games these days.
And I do think that's something that the Sonic series in particular has really struggled with. As the series has gotten more modern, that's one of a couple of things, and this is sort of something that I know I'm going to go into more in like my next Sonic season, doing like the boost games. But like, for one thing, like, and like we were talking a little bit earlier about how Sonic Heroes reuses set pieces, and you kind of doing the same thing over and over again, and that was like one of Sonic Team's many attempts to address sort of I don't want to call it a flaw, but like Sonic games had always, like other platformers will have many more levels, but they'll be very linear and they'll reuse lots of assets. Like, you like think of how many cave levels were in Donkey Kong Country, for instance. Sonic games had always, for the most part, aside from exceptions like Hilltop Zone compared to Emerald Hill, had not like really done that, and even those two levels are very different aesthetically and in terms of level design and in terms of like enemies. So that was something that helped Sonic stand out at the time. But in the leap to 3D, like Sonic games had to be like the problem became that replayability was no longer like nearly the selling point that it used to be. What people wanted now was like value for their money through game length. And Sonic, as conceived, was not really set up to give people that, because you're supposed to replay
honestly,
it over and over again.
I think games are getting a little too long. So many games nowadays are this huge open world where you're expected to sink so much time into it, and it gets overwhelming. And I'm like, why do they think I'm only ever going to play this game one time? I much prefer shorter games that I can come back to without worrying about it demanding so much of me,
Mm-hmm. To be fair, I feel like there's only really open world games that are that long. If you look at most other like linear campaign single player games, they're all fairly reasonable with their length. I think the Uncharted games are just fine. Last of Us is just fine. Now DMC5 seems just fine for what people have been saying, so I think it's mostly just the open world stuff.
But when you look at something like I guess the boost games are probably a really good example of this, where like take Sonic Generations, where every single like beat of a level has to be laid out by hand, and it has to look good, and it has to like follow a theme, and it has to and like the player is going to be moving through all of this so quickly. Like there's no way that you could build a game like that and have it last like 15 hours. At least not without padding it out to an incredibly uncomfortable degree. And I think that Sonic Team has tried a lot of different things over the years to try to address that problem. One of those being like different playable characters that we saw in the Adventure series. I think that's exactly what the Werehog was an attempt to address.
Yeah.
But again, that's just what confounds me. Like, I guess people's priorities. Like, okay, I get it that $60 seems like a lot to spend on the game, but again, why did they walk into it thinking I am only ever going to play this game one time, so I better get the most out of the campaign?
I mean, I guess that because that's how a lot of people do approach games. Like, I always remember like gaming magazines like that I read when I was a kid would rate games based on replayability, like how much is there to do in like a second or a third or a fourth or an infinite playthroughs, and like you never hear about that sort of thing anymore. Like I love the Uncharted series. I've played 2 and 4 and loved both of them, but I have no like incentive to ever go back and replay those games,
Yeah.
Loved them while I was playing them, and that's kind of like what a lot of AAA game development at least when it comes to non-open world, non-loot boxy stuff, is nowadays.
Well,
Yeah.
again, I don't want to sound like a fanboy right now, but the Resident Evil 2 remake is pretty long the first time, about 10 hours or so, and it's super replayable. So there are absolutely developers that are still, you know, trying to incorporate replayability and also make it of decent length the first time you play it.
Yeah, the key is just to not make it exhausting. Because the thing about like those Uncharted games, I got the last one and I enjoyed the heck out of it, but it was such an endeavor that I'm gonna need to wait a while before I go back to it. That's the thing. Some games are easy to jump into again because they don't demand that much of you, and then there are some that put like such an emotional strain on you. It's like, I need a break. I can't go through that again.
Wait, I died? How did I die?
Oops.
How did I die?